What's good, Shellitronnn here. You can call me Shells, and I'm back at it again with a brand new video. I'm gonna keep it a Bowberry biscuit. I know y'all already heard the news about Jared Goff, Matt Stafford. I had a video up just very recently, like maybe a few hours ago, talking about Matt Stafford and how the Panthers were deep, like very, very much trying to get Matt Stafford to come to the Panthers. There were also reports saying that Matt Stafford didn't necessarily want to come here or to Washington or to Indianapolis. He wanted to go to LA, but it made it seem like Carolina was on the short list and that it was very, very possible and almost expected that Matt Stafford was going to come to Carolina before the Rams offered all those picks, you feel me? So it wasn't impossible, but Matt Stafford ultimately did want to go to LA. That's not the point of this video. The point of this video is kind of a response to the response to Matt Stafford, his trade becoming a 2 first-round, 1 third-rounder, plus a quarterback transaction. That's made a lot of people believe that Deshaun Watson's trade value has gone either way, way up or possibly down. People think that, if Matt Stafford's worth 2 firsts, a third, and another quarterback in the exchange, then imagine what Deshaun Watson's going to be. Some people believe that, now that Matt Stafford's off the board so quickly, the Texans are going to have to try to do a lot more, maybe even undersell what Deshaun Watson's real value is to make sure they actually can move him this offseason, because you don't want a situation like the Rockets where you're not moving James Harden and then you end up getting significantly less than you thought you should for him. I might touch back on that here in a second when I talk about Deshaun Watson and the Texans, that kind of stuff. But I want to go to this tweet right here that you see beside me from John McClain. He's a writer for the Houston Chronicle, I think it is. He says the Rams-Lion trade will have nothing to do with the Watson trade if the Texans do it. And I hate the end of that sentence, if the Texans do it. We saw the press conference. We saw all the talk from the GM, the coach, all that stuff, bro. I'm glad you got your shot. But this really ain't your shot, because ain't no if the Texans do it. It's when the Texans do it, how they do it, and what team Deshaun Watson ends up going to. Let me get to the tweet, though. They'll want 2 1s, 2 2s, and 2 young defensive starters at the least. Watson, 25, under contract, great quarterback, team leader, beloved by the fans, pillar of the community. Start with the Jets. Now, John McClain, I know you work in the city, and you kind of basically, even though you don't work for the actual team, you basically work for the team here, and I see what you're doing. He is trying to drive up the price. Let me be very, very clear. This is what the Texans want. 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and they understand that J.J. Watt is probably out the door too. All this Deshaun Watson news is overshadowing the fact that J.J. Watt has been very, very dissatisfied with the Texans organization and with the Texans players. You saw that press conference he did, I think it was like week 14 or 15. He was saying that dudes don't come in wanting to play. Dudes don't come in putting that work in. Dudes don't want to practice. You got J.J. Watt saying that publicly in a post-game presser, saying that he's sad for the fans, for Deshaun, for everybody in the city. I think he's about on his way out the door too. Probably a little bit less publicly, but the Texans understand if they have J.J. Watt for this year, they are not going to have him for very much longer at all. So asking for 2 young defensive starters is a smart move, but this is what they want from a sucker. This is what they want from someone who believes that this deal needs to get done this very second, and they just give up and give in to all the demands. I do not believe for a second that a team is going to give up 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and 2 young starter-level defensive players that they actually definitely want, because you're going to gut your chances at already having a team that can even use Deshaun Watson. Now you have a quarterback, you're down 4 picks, and on the other side of the ball, you're weaker because those are pieces you're going to build for toward the future. So unless you're already deep on defense with vets, and you have a hell of a lot of cap space, and you don't need to draft at the top end of the draft for a long time, then you're good on Deshaun Watson. You can pick him up. That's not very many teams who are willing to make this move right now. But let's just say hypothetically, if the Panthers were to entertain this sort of situation right here, 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and then 2 defensive starters who are also young, what would that look like? Obviously number 8 right now, and we have a very high number 2 in this draft as well. We're probably not going to be all that great next year. Even with Deshaun Watson, our O-line's not going to be great. If we have to give up 2 defensive players, which I'll get to in a second, you're going to have to get rid of players who had high impact on this season, who were part of the reason why we were in close games and maybe even won in this season. You probably can't even build a roster until really next year, but more honestly, the third year you have Deshaun Watson, it's going to get ugly. But what would it take? What 2 players would it take to get Deshaun Watson? Now I know, look, you hear the word starters. Well, what if we gave up KK Short and, Kenny Robinson? Those are 2 players. First off, KK isn't all that young. Kenny Robinson is not a starter level player. You have to think about it like this. Whenever you suggest a trade, think about it if you were the Texans, or think about it if you're the Panthers and we had Deshaun Watson right now and Deshaun Watson wanted out and another team was offering us what we just saw from KK Short. Would you accept KK Short in that trade? Would you bring KK Short onto your team to get rid of Deshaun Watson? I'm not going to answer it for you, but I think I have a pretty good idea of what your answer would be. Let's be real about the trade assets we would have to give up. Now, the 2 most obvious ones, so the 2 best young players on this roster is very, very clear. Brian Burns, Jeremy Chinn. I do not believe it will take both Brian Burns and Jeremy Chinn to make this deal go through, especially since you're already giving up 2 firsts and 2 seconds. You don't need to give away Brian Burns and Jeremy Chinn here. I think you can start with Shaq. I think the first player you think about is Shaq Thompson, not just because he had a down year this year and you may not have liked the idea that the front office gave him that much money. 4 years, $54 million. What is that? $13.5 million per year. That's a lot. And Shaq being an outside linebacker, I think the front office panicked after losing TD and Luke, but I think he also got paid before Luke retired. Maybe the front office knew about Luke retiring, although I highly doubt that. 100% doubt that they knew that Luke was going to go ahead and retire. I think everyone was blindsided by that. But you not only are able to drop a player who you perceive to be not exactly, getting better. Maybe he plays about on par as he always has, but in the past, he also had TD and Luke to, buffer what was lacking on his end. And at the same time, you're able to, get that money off your books. So that covers you on 2 ends. You may think you made a mistake in paying him that money, so you're able to get off of that contract very, very early in it. You paid for it for 1 year and 1 year only, and he's out of there. Now, me personally, I think Phil Snow did really good as a defensive coordinator. We saw him adjust multiple times at halftime. There was a couple games I thought he should have adjusted a little bit earlier than that, but we saw multiple games against elite quarterbacks where he adjusted at halftime and held guys like Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers to field goals for the whole second half. We saw our defense, who we all believed before this year started. If you believed our defense was going to be any higher than bottom 5 or 6, you are lying. There's not a single Panthers fan who believed this defense back in August, back in September, was going to be anywhere even halfway decent. Let's be real about that. Honestly, no one believed our defense was going to be what we saw happen this past 2020 NFL season. Phil Snow came in amongst the fans saying he was bad, horrible, should get fired after 8 weeks into the year. Made the defense literally never the reason why we lost games. This was a team that was in most of the games we played. We won a few games here and there, and the games that were 1-score losses, those were games where the offense had the ball to end the game. Those weren't games where we were getting blown out and the teams we were playing against ended up playing prevent and we got some, garbage time, 7 points, 10 points here or there, and we knocked the score down to it being within what it looks like competitive if you didn't watch the game, if you only look at the box score. That's not what happened. This defense had us in just about every single game this year. I think with Phil Snow, maybe Shaq Thompson can get better, but the amount of money it's going to take to pay him and whatnot, I think Shaq Thompson has to be the place where you start. and it gets a little harder from here. I think the next most obvious piece you want to go toward is probably Yetur Gross-Matos, YGM for short. I like YGM. I think he has a lot of upside. The only thing is, I mean, it's hard to look at the other guys in the team and say, Jeremy Chin is a non-touchable. Brian Burns is untouchable. You look around, there's not too many other very young players. F.A. Abada, I think, is at the end of his deal. You can't really trade him away. Marquise Haynes isn't exactly a starter level player. I like Marquise Haynes a lot. I actually like Marquise Haynes a whole lot. But I'm not sure he'd be enough to sweeten the deal with the 2 firsts, 2 seconds, especially since you're going to go ahead and give Shaq Thompson. I think Marquise Haynes could be enough if you gave up Chin or Burns as well. But since they're untouchable, you have to give up a little bit higher caliber player than that. Bravion Roy looked very, very good. For a 6th round pick, I think Bravion Roy showed up really, really well this year. He did not play like a 6th round pick. But I think the Texans are going to see him as a 6th round pick and say, you trying to cheat us, you trying to finesse us right here. I don't care what Bravion Roy did in them trenches last year. We are not going to accept a 6th round, 2nd year player in this deal for Deshaun Watson, no matter how well he played. And that's the kind of label you get sometimes when you're a later round pick for the first year of your career. It could have been a blip. Who knows? Is it really a trend yet? It's hard to really understand what players are going to be after a while. But there is another player. Possibly Dante Jackson. Now, that's going to be a little bit harder because this, I believe, is his last year on his deal. This is going to be his 4th year in the league. And it's a little bit hard to sell the Texans on Dante because I'm going to be real with you. In his first 2 years in the league, he was able to make some very big plays. He was just more likely to be inconsistent in the wrong area, able to get tricked. You find him out there guarding space, defending grass when he should be in a receiver's back pocket. Those were all things that college scouts, college analysts, draft experts, if you can even call them that, were talking about Dante was doing in college. And those things showed up for the very first 2 years of his career. But this past season right here, Dante looked a lot more consistent. He was in the right spot at the right time. I think in the very first game against the Raiders, he was kind of scared to tackle, but that wasn't much of an issue moving forward. But what was an issue was that for the rest of the year, I think past week 6 or 7, for the rest of the year, his little toesy woesies was hurt. He had turf toe or something, and he was in and out of games. Some games he was out. Other games he played 2.5 quarters, had to get pulled, and now we see guys like Troy Pride coming in completely cold, not knowing, he's just not expecting to come in the game at all probably, or not for very many snaps at all, and now all of a sudden he's getting pulled in there, and we understand what Troy Pride is at this point. Not going to be an instant star. I think he's going to be good moving forward, but you understand what was going on there, and obviously Eli Apple was a bust. So he wasn't even able to fill in the role for Dante going out. It's hard to sell someone on Dante when for 2 of his 3 years in the league, he was kind of a problem. And then the 3rd year, he had a nagging injury on his little piggies. It's hard to say that if you're the Texans, do you really accept that deal? Do you say we take Shaq Thompson and Dante Jackson? You probably have to do Shaq and YGM. Now, if you can make it Shaq and Dante, that's great because Dante's on the last year of his deal and Shaq has a big deal that's with a lot of money, and you can get rid of 2 things that are perceived as even I won't even call them big problems, but semi-problematic in different ways. Not the players specifically, but the situations with the contracts are a little bit problematic from a time and money perspective with Dante and Shaq respectively. That's a lot of words, whole lot of syllables, but I'm saying all that to say this. If you're able to get rid of Shaq and Dante, the 2 firsts, the 2 seconds for this man, Deshaun Watson, maybe if you're able to do a lot of good things in free agency and in the later rounds of the draft with the O-line, you can make some moves for real. That's not too bad. You might be able to make it 2 firsts, a second, Shaq and Dante, and a 3rd. Or if you give up YGM in the place of Dante, you might be able to keep one of those picks. Say 2 firsts, a second, YGM, and then Shaq. That'd be dope. That'd be good with me. I would be 100% fine with that. And honestly, I'd be cool with it being YGM and Dante. We keep Shaq. I'm not 100% sold on Shaq being done yet. I'm not that sold on it. It's really the money issue for me. I think with Phil Snow, he can become worth that money. It's kind of a gamble, but I think on the edge, we have so much depth that you could maybe be willing to give up YGM and you don't lose a ton. Losing another linebacker would be kind of tough. I won't lie to you. It is what it is. That's how I feel about it, though. If it is going to be 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and 2 starters, you do not touch Brian. You do not touch Jeremy Chinn. And if you touch one of them, then it has to be, you got to get rid of one of those first or seconds. You got to get rid of one of those first or seconds. It can't be both. But if you get rid of one of them, you're going to get Brian or Jeremy Chinn, and then a player like Kenny Robinson, or a player like, I don't know, maybe a guy like Marquise Haynes, or maybe, I don't know what it's going to be, maybe Jermaine Carter. But you're not going to get one of those superstars and then one of our other impact players or, upper tier role players. That's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen because you're going to give up so much of your defensive identity, and you still have to build up your O-line, and you still have to build up those sections in the defense. Nah, if you take one of my superstars, you cannot get one of my bigger role players. Simple as that. That's how I feel about it, man. I am not 100% out on Deshaun Watson. It's going to take a lot of money. A lot of draft capital, but there are teams that spend literal decades, tens of picks, trying to build a team that's going to have a good quarterback and a good team around them, only to never have that. We have seen teams go literal decades without having a franchise quarterback. It is not impossible. Some teams in the NFL are still in that phase of not finding. The Dolphins don't have a franchise quarterback. They haven't had one since Marino retired in 2000? The Jets for a long ass time. The Bills for a long, they just got Josh Allen, so hey, it is what it is there. But we've seen teams for a very, very long time not have franchise quarterbacks. And when you find one, if you're able to get one without completely destroying your team and your future, you gotta try. And Scotty Fitt did say he wants to be aggressive and be in on every deal. And the team keeps throwing Teddy Bridgewater under the bus anyway. Damn. We can throw in Teddy Bridgewater instead of a second defensive player. If we threw in Teddy and YGM, make that move. I think you don't have to, like I said, this is for suckers, right? This is a sucker's bet. You can probably bring this down a little bit. Put in Teddy, add in like a defensive player, maybe YGM, something like that. And that's cool with me. If it's Teddy and Shaq Thompson, you get rid of 2 big contracts and you get Deshaun Watson, that is worth the picks. 100%. I would say, you know what? I will give you both 2 firsts and 2 seconds if you take Teddy and Shaq Thompson. That's a net win for us. I 100% believe that. The team would have so much room to make moves in free agency. That's a big stimmy right there. 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and you take the Teddy Bridgewater deal and the Shaq Thompson deal off of our books? That's a stimmy. Come on now. I will be 100% down with that. That's on me, though. That's how I feel about it. What are your thoughts? Do you want Deshaun Watson? Do you not want Deshaun Watson? Would you rather get someone else in the draft? Would you even want a quarterback in this draft at all? What would you trade for Deshaun Watson? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. And you already know what to do with that like button.
Cheers to you, appreciate the chance. Been told y'all I been the man. Been told y'all I had the gift. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Real ones gonna recommend. Count this as another win.